I used to believe that love was supposed to feel safe. Not exciting every second, not perfect, not like something out of a movie, just safe. The kind of safe where you close your eyes at night and trust that the person lying next to you would never harm you. That belief is the reason I almost lost everything. Because the night I pretended to swallow the pills was the night I realized the most dangerous place I had ever been wasn't a dark alley or a stranger's car. It was my own bedroom. My name is Jasmine. At the time all of this began, I was 34 years old, a high school English teacher living in Atlanta. I loved my job, I loved my students, I loved my quiet routines and my simple life. Most of all, I loved my husband, Devin. We had been married for 2 years, together for 3, and from the outside our marriage looked calm and solid. No shouting, no jealousy, no obvious cracks. Devin worked from home as a software engineer, and I came home each day exhausted from teaching, my mind still full of essays to grade and teenage drama to manage. He was always there when I walked through the door, always asking about my day, always listening like what I said mattered. Every night without fail he brought me my vitamins with a glass of water, kissed my forehead softly, smiled, and told me he loved me. Got to keep my baby healthy, he'd say, and I trusted him completely. The changes started slowly, so slowly that I didn't recognize them as danger. I began feeling tired in a way I had never felt before. Not the normal tired that comes from a long day, but a deep, heavy exhaustion that clung to my body no matter how much I slept. I started going to bed earlier, sleeping 9 or 10 hours and still waking up feeling like I hadn't rested at all. Devin said it was stress. Teaching was demanding, he reminded me. Anyone would feel drained. That was when he became obsessed with health and wellness. He talked about supplements, vitamins, minerals, how important they were for people with high-stress jobs. He bought a bottle of plain capsules from what looked like a health food store and told me they were a special blend to help with sleep, stress, and energy. Vitamin D, magnesium, B complex. I've done the research, he said. Just trust me. And I did. Not long after that, my memory started slipping in ways that scared me, even though I tried to laugh it off. Devin would bring up conversations I had no memory of having, plans I supposedly suggested, decisions I apparently made. When I looked confused, he'd smile and tell me I was overworked, that I needed rest. I wanted to believe him, but the gaps grew wider. I'd stand in front of my classroom and forget what I was teaching. I'd lose my place mid-sentence, staring at my students while my mind went completely blank. One of them asked me if I was okay, and that moment should have terrified me. Instead, I felt ashamed. Then there were the mornings. The mornings when I woke up wearing clothes I didn't remember putting on. I'd fall asleep in an old t-shirt and wake up in a nightgown I barely recognized. When I asked Devin about it, he didn't get defensive. He laughed gently and said I must have changed in my sleep. You were half awake, he told me. You probably don't remember. And I accepted that explanation because the alternative felt impossible. The bruises were harder to ignore. Small at first, faint marks on my upper arms that looked disturbingly like fingerprints. I noticed them one morning while getting dressed and felt a cold wave of fear run through me. That night I asked Devin about them, trying to keep my voice calm even though my hands were shaking. He looked concerned, almost offended that I was worried. He suggested I might be bumping into things or bruising easily. Maybe anemia, maybe stress. He offered to make a doctor's appointment and even drove me there. He sat in the waiting room like the supportive husband everyone admired. The tests came back normal. The doctor suggested anxiety. Devin immediately agreed. Another explanation, another pill, another thing I was told to trust. But I didn't feel anxious before all this started. The anxiety came later, after the confusion, after the exhaustion, after the growing sense that something in my life was deeply wrong. The night everything changed started like every other night. Around 10:30, Devin came into the bedroom with my vitamins and water. He sat on the edge of the bed, watched me take them, kissed my forehead, and told me good night. Within minutes, the familiar heaviness began to pull me under. But that night, something was different. The pills tasted wrong, not terrible, just off. They dissolved too fast, leaving a bitter aftertaste that lingered on my tongue. And for the first time, a clear, terrifying thought cut through the fog in my mind. What if this wasn't stress? What if this wasn't in my head? My heart started racing. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of my body sink deeper into the mattress. I thought about the memory gaps, the bruises, the strange mornings, and the way Devin insisted on watching me swallow those pills. In that moment, fear gave me clarity. I made a decision that probably saved my life. I was not going to sleep. Staying awake felt like torture. My body was heavy, my thoughts slippery. I dug my fingernails into my palms until it hurt. I bit the inside of my cheek. I counted backward from 1,000, clinging to each number like a lifeline. About 30 minutes later, I heard the bedroom door open. Devin stepped inside. I kept my eyes closed and slowed my breathing. I felt him lean over me, his breath warm against my face. He was checking to see if I was unconscious. After a long moment, he straightened up and left. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might give me away. I lay there in the dark, terrified, waiting for something I couldn't name. At 11:47 p.m., I glanced at the clock on my nightstand, using the time to anchor myself to reality. Then I heard footsteps again. Devin returned, standing over me longer this time. Through barely open eyes, I saw him pull something from his pocket. He paused, then left the room once more. That was the moment I knew without a doubt that I was not imagining things. Whatever was happening in my home, whatever my husband was doing, was real, and I was running out of time. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you ignored the small signs something was wrong? If this story already feels unsettling, please like this video so it reaches someone who might need to hear it. And subscribe, because what I discovered next changes everything. The next morning I woke up with my heart still racing, like my body hadn't gotten the message that the night was over. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, soft and ordinary, and for a brief moment I wondered if everything I'd felt was just a nightmare. Devin lay beside me, breathing evenly, his face relaxed, peaceful. He looked exactly like the man I had married. Loving, safe, normal, and that made my stomach twist even more because monsters aren't supposed to look like that. He woke up a few minutes later, stretched and smiled at me. "Morning, beautiful," he said, leaning in to kiss my forehead. I flinched internally but forced myself not to move. He asked how I slept, and I lied without even thinking. "Good," I said. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. He seemed satisfied, climbed out of bed, and went to make coffee like nothing in the world was wrong. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying the night over and over again. The pills, the way he checked on me. The thing he pulled from his pocket, I didn't know what it was, but I knew it wasn't harmless. At work that day, I moved through my classes on autopilot. My students' voices sounded far away, like I was underwater again. I smiled when I was supposed to smile, nodded when I was supposed to nod, but inside my mind was screaming. I kept asking myself the same question over and over. How long had this been happening? Weeks, months, longer, and how had I not seen it? Every loving gesture, every soft kiss, every "I'm just taking care of you" suddenly felt suspicious. But suspicion without proof is a dangerous thing. It makes you doubt yourself, and Devin had spent months teaching me to do exactly that. That afternoon, my best friend Kesha called me. We'd been friends since college, the kind of friends who could hear the truth in each other's voices even when we tried to hide it. She asked me if I was okay, said I'd seemed off the last time we hung out, slower, distant. "You look like you were on something," she said carefully, not accusing, just worried. My chest tight. I told her about the vitamins, about the anxiety medication, and there was a pause on the line. "Jas," she said softly, "that doesn't sound right." After we hung up, her words stayed with me like an echo I couldn't silence. That was when I started paying attention. Really paying attention, not just to how I felt, but to Devin, to his habits, to the way he watched me. I noticed how insistent he was about my pills. If I ever said I'd take them later, his smile would tighten just for a second. A flash of something dark would cross his face before he laughed it off and reminded me again. Sometimes he wouldn't leave the room until he watched me swallow. Once he even joked about making sure I opened my mouth afterward. I laughed too, but my skin crawled. A few days later, something small but terrifying caught my eye. Devin's home office had always been off limits during work hours, which I respected. He said he handled sensitive data and needed privacy. But one afternoon I came home early from school and found the office door open. He wasn't there, and on the bottom drawer of his desk I saw a padlock, a real metal lock on a drawer that had never been locked before. My heart started pounding. I stood there staring at it, why instincts screaming that this mattered. When Devin came back, I asked him about it casually, pretending not to care. He barely looked up, said it was for a new client, extra security requirements. Then he changed the subject and asked about dinner. His calmness unsettled me more than anger ever could have. The nights became unbearable. I slept lightly, waking at every sound. Sometimes I'd hear Devin moving around the house late at night, footsteps in the hallway, doors opening and closing. When I asked him, he said he couldn't sleep, that he was just getting water or working late. And again I believed him, even as fear twisted in my chest. One night I woke up around midnight, my body heavy, my mind foggy, and I heard him talking on the phone in the hallway. His voice was low, urgent. I caught fragments of words. Tuesday night, same price, she'll be out cold. My blood turned to ice. I tried to move, to get up, but my body wouldn't respond. Panic surged as I realized I couldn't even scream. Before I could hear more, everything went black. The next morning I told myself it had been a dream. I had to. The alternative was too horrifying to accept. Devin acted normal, loving, affectionate. How could a man who held me like that be planning something behind my back? But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew fast. I started testing reality in small ways, pretending to take my vitamins and watching his reaction, paying attention to how quickly the drowsiness hit, watching his face instead of trusting his words. The man I saw during those moments wasn't the husband I thought I knew. There was a tension in him, a need for control that made my stomach churn. By the end of that week, I understood one thing clearly. I was not safe, not in the way I had believed. Something was happening to me, something I didn't yet fully understand, but I knew I couldn't confront Devin without proof. If I was wrong, I'd destroy my marriage. And if I was right, confronting him without evidence could be dangerous. So I decided to do the one thing he never expected me to do. I stopped trusting his words and started trusting my instincts. And that decision set me on a path that would change my life forever. Once that switch flipped in my mind, there was no turning it off. I couldn't unsee the patterns anymore. Every loving gesture now felt rehearsed. Every smile felt like a mask. I started living in two realities at once, the life Devin wanted me to see and the darker one my instincts were warning me about. And the hardest part was pretending everything was normal while fear slowly took over my body. I began noticing how carefully Devin managed my routine. He paid attention to when I went to bed, how tired I looked, whether I'd eaten enough. If I skipped dinner, he'd insist I eat something before taking my pills. If I said I wasn't tired, he'd gently remind me how exhausted I'd been lately. It all sounded caring on the surface, but underneath it was control. Subtle, quiet, suffocating control. I realized he didn't like unpredictability. He liked knowing exactly where I was, what I'd consumed, when I'd sleep. And the more I resisted, the more attentive he became. I started pretending to swallow the pills more often. I'd hold them under my tongue, wait for him to leave the room, then spit them out in the bathroom and flush them. At first it worked. I felt clearer in the mornings, less foggy, more like myself. But Devin noticed the change before I fully did. He watched me more closely, started standing there while I swallowed, asked me questions right after, testing my alertness. One night he laughed and told me to open my mouth so he could make sure. My heart raced, but I forced a smile and did it. The pills were already hidden in my cheek. His eyes lingered on my face for a second too long, like he was searching for something. When he finally nodded and kissed my forehead, I felt sick with relief. My phone became another source of terror. I'd pick it up and see messages I didn't remember sending. Replies to friends, confirmations of plans, casual texts that sounded almost like me but not quite. My words were usually warm, full of emotion, little emojis everywhere. These messages were cold, short, efficient. When I asked Devin about it, he shrugged and said I probably texted when I was half asleep. You do that sometimes, he said easily. I wanted to believe him. But I also started checking my phone obsessively, terrified of what else I'd find. The house itself began to feel different. Rooms that once felt familiar now felt threatening. The basement especially. We rarely used it, just a storage space with old boxes and tools. But every time I walked past the basement door, I felt a wave of dread I couldn't explain. At night, I sometimes heard faint sounds coming from downstairs, a door opening, footsteps, a low murmur of voices that stopped when I focused too hard on listening. Each time I told myself I was imagining it. But fear doesn't come from nothing, it comes from patterns your mind is trying to connect. I stopped talking to people. I didn't realize it at first, but Devin was slowly isolating me. He'd comment on how tired I was whenever I mentioned seeing friends. He'd say things like, "Why don't you just rest tonight?" or "You don't need to push yourself." When my sister called, he'd sit nearby listening. When Kesha invited me out, he'd suggest a quiet night in instead. None of it was outright controlling. It didn't have to be. It worked because it sounded reasonable. Loving concern. And soon my world had shrunk down to just him and the house we shared. The fear reached a breaking point the night I woke up and couldn't move. I remember opening my eyes and realizing my body was completely unresponsive. Panic flooded me as I tried to lift my arm, turn my head, make any sound at all. I heard Devin moving around the house, opening doors, walking down the stairs. I wanted to scream his name, but nothing came out. Tears slid down the sides of my face as I lay there trapped inside my own body. By the time I could move again, the house was silent. Devin was back in bed, breathing softly like nothing had happened. I lay there shaking until morning. Next day, I finally admitted the truth to myself. I wasn't just tired, I wasn't just stressed, I was being controlled, drugged, manipulated, and the scariest part was how normal Devin made it all look. If I went to the police with nothing but my fear, they'd tell me to rest, to manage my anxiety, to trust my husband, and Devin knew that. He relied on it. That's when I understood that if I wanted answers, I couldn't confront him, I couldn't accuse him, I had to become quiet. Careful, strategic. I started planning without even realizing it. I paid attention to Devin's schedule, to when he left the house, how long he was gone, what he did before bed. I memorized the sound of his footsteps, the rhythm of his movements. I became hyper-aware, alert in a way I had never been before. Fear sharpened my senses, and buried beneath that fear was something else growing slowly, something stronger: determination. Whatever Devin was doing to me, whatever secrets he was hiding, I was going to find them. Not for revenge, not yet, but for the truth. Because I knew one thing with terrifying certainty: if I didn't uncover the truth soon, I might not get another chance. At what point do you stop explaining things away and start trusting your instincts? If you've ever been made to feel like you were imagining things, comment below with a simple "I see this." You're not alone, and neither was I. The night everything finally broke started quietly, just like all the others. That's what still haunts me. There was no warning, no argument, no dramatic shift in his behavior. Devin brought me my pills and water at the usual time, kissed my forehead, told me he loved me, and turned off the light. If I hadn't already been living in fear, I might have believed him. I might have closed my eyes and let myself drift away like I'd done so many nights before. But that night, I didn't swallow the pills. I let them rest under my tongue, bitter and foreign, and waited. The drowsiness still came, slower this time, like my body remembered what it was supposed to do. My limbs felt heavy. My thoughts blurred at the edges. I focused on staying still, breathing evenly, pretending sleep had taken me. Minutes passed, then more. The house settled into silence. And then, just as my nerves began to fray, I heard Devin move. The mattress shifted as he stood. His footsteps were careful, deliberate. He was trying not to wake me. That alone sent a chill through my chest. People don't move like that unless they're hiding something. I kept my eyes closed as he leaned over me. I felt his gaze on my face, felt the weight of it. He brushed my hair back gently, almost lovingly, but there was something cold in the gesture now that I couldn't ignore. He whispered my name just once, soft enough that I almost missed it. When I didn't respond, he straightened up. I heard him leave the room. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might give me away. I waited, counting my breaths, anchoring myself to the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. At some point, I heard the basement door open. The sound was unmistakable, a hollow creak followed by the dull thud of it closing behind him. My entire body went cold. We barely used the basement. There was no reason for him to be down there in the middle of the night. I lay frozen, every instinct screaming at me to get up, to look, to run, and at the same time begging me not to move. Fear pinned me to the bed. Then I heard voices. Not just Devon's. Another man's voice, low and unfamiliar, carried faintly up through the house. My stomach dropped. I pressed my lips together to keep from making a sound as panic flooded me. Devon was talking to someone in our basement while he thought I was unconscious. As upstairs, the realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't stress or paranoia. This was real. I strained to hear more, but the words were muffled. I caught fragments, numbers, a laugh. Devon's voice sounded relaxed, casual, like he was discussing something ordinary. That was what terrified me the most. Whatever he was doing, he'd done it before. It wasn't new, it was routine. I lay there trembling, my mind racing with possibilities I didn't want to consider. Why was someone else in my house? Why the secrecy? Why at night? And what did it have to do with the pills? After what felt like an eternity, the voices faded. I heard footsteps on the stairs, then the basement door opening and closing again. Devon came back upstairs. He paused outside the bedroom. I held my breath, every muscle in my body screaming. The door opened slowly. He stepped inside, checked on me again, and stood there for a long moment. Then he left and the house went silent. I don't remember falling asleep after that. I just remember lying there, staring into the darkness, my mind shattering piece by piece. Every strange detail from the past months suddenly made sense. The memory gaps, the bruises, the clothes I didn't remember wearing, the messages I didn't remember sending, the way he watched me take the pills. It all came crashing together in one horrible realization. My husband wasn't just lying to me. He was betraying me in ways I couldn't yet fully understand. The next morning, Devon acted like nothing had happened. He made coffee, asked about my plans for the day, smiled at me across the kitchen counter. I looked at him and felt like I was staring at a stranger wearing my husband's face. I wanted to scream. I wanted to confront him, demand answers, tear the truth out of him no matter what it cost. But fear held me back, fear and something else I hadn't felt before, clarity. I knew then that confronting him without proof would be a mistake. If he was capable of drugging me, of bringing strangers into our home, then I had no idea how far he might go if he felt threatened. I needed evidence, something solid, something undeniable. And that meant I had to play along a little longer. I had to pretend I was still the trusting, tired wife he thought he controlled. That decision broke something inside me. Pretending to love him, to accept his touch, to listen to his lies without reacting felt like a betrayal of myself. But I told myself it was temporary, that this was the price of survival. Every time he handed me those pills, every time he kissed my forehead, I reminded myself that I was no longer powerless. I was watching him now, studying him, waiting. By the end of that day, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever was happening in that basement, whatever Devon was hiding, was bigger and darker than I had imagined. And I was standing at the edge of something that would destroy my marriage, my life as I knew it, and the man I thought I loved. I just didn't know yet that it would also be the beginning of my revenge. Once you realize the person you love is capable of betraying you, something changes inside you. Fear doesn't disappear, but it sharpens, it becomes focused. That's what happened to me. I stopped asking myself why Devon was doing this and started asking how. How was he controlling me? How was he hiding it? And most importantly, how could I prove it without putting myself in even more danger? I knew confronting him was not an option. Not yet. I'd seen the careful way he watched me, the way he measured his actions. A man like that doesn't panic easily. He plans. And if I accused him without proof, I had no doubt he'd deny everything, paint me as unstable, maybe even tighten his grip on my life. So I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I pretended nothing had changed. I smiled. I laughed at his jokes. I thanked him for dinner. And every time he handed me those pills, I felt something twist in my chest. But I took them, or at least I made him think I did. I got better at hiding them. I'd press them under my tongue, tuck them into the side of my cheek, then excuse myself to the bathroom and flush them down the toilet. The first few nights I was terrified he'd notice. But he didn't, or maybe he thought he didn't need to check anymore. Either way, the fog slowly began to lift. I woke up clearer, more alert, more myself than I had been in months, and with that clarity came resolve. The first thing I did was tell someone. Not everything, not yet, but enough. I called Kesha. My voice shook as I told her something was wrong, that I thought Devin was controlling me, that I didn't feel safe. I didn't mention the pills or the basement yet. I wasn't ready to say it out loud. But Kesha didn't question me, she didn't minimize it. She just said, "I believe you," and that alone made me feel less alone than I had in months. The second thing I did was start observing like my life depended on it, because see, it did. I memorized Devin's routine, his morning habits, his work calls, his nightly patterns. I noted when he left the house and when he returned. I noticed that he went for a run almost every evening at the same time, always gone for about 40 minutes, predictable, reliable, a window. The third thing I did was stop trusting anything in my home. I stopped eating food I hadn't prepared myself. I stopped drinking anything he handed me. I kept my phone locked at all times and changed my password. I turned off facial recognition. I started sleeping lighter, training myself to wake at the smallest sound. It was exhausting, but fear has a way of keeping you alert. The idea came to me slowly, and when it did, it terrified me. Cameras. If I couldn't stay awake forever, if I couldn't follow him every night, then I needed something that could. Something that didn't blink. Something that recorded the truth even when I couldn't witness it myself. The thought of spying on my own husband made me feel sick. But then I remembered the voices in the basement, and my fear hardened into something colder. The next afternoon, instead of going straight home from school, I drove to a store across town where no one would recognize me. My hands were shaking as I walked through the aisles. I felt like everyone could see what I was about to do, like they knew I was buying protection from my own marriage. I picked 2 small cameras, tiny ones, the kind you could hide in plain sight. I paid in cash. When I sat back in my car, staring at the bag on the passenger seat, I cried. Not loud sobs, silent ones. Because buying those cameras meant accepting the truth. My marriage was already over, I just didn't know it yet. That evening, Devin went for his usual run. The moment the door closed behind him, I moved. I planted the first camera in our bedroom, hidden on a bookshelf angled toward the nightstand where he always placed my pills. My hands were shaking so badly I had to try twice to get it steady. I tested the feed on my phone. It worked, clear, silent, watching. Then I went downstairs. The basement felt different now, heavier, like it knew what had happened there. I searched for a place to hide the second camera and settled on an air vent on the far wall. I pried it open with a screwdriver from Devin's toolbox and tucked the camera inside, angled wide. When I replaced the vent cover, my heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I barely made it back upstairs before Devin returned. That night when he brought me my pills, I felt disgust rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down and smiled. I pretended to take them. I played my part. Inside, I was screaming. I lay in bed afterwards, staring at the ceiling, waiting for him to move, waiting for the truth to reveal itself. I didn't sleep, I couldn't, I just listened. And when I finally heard the basement door open again, I didn't follow him this time. I stayed perfectly still and let the cameras do what I couldn't, because I knew that whatever was about to be captured on those recordings would change everything. It would be the proof I needed, the weapon I would use, and once I had it, Devin would never be able to lie to me or anyone ever again. The next morning, Devin told me he had errands to run. He said it casually, like it was nothing, like my entire world wasn't hanging by a thread. He kissed my cheek, grabbed his keys, and walked out the door. I waited until I heard his car pull away before I moved. My legs felt weak, my hands unsteady, but I forced myself to stand up. This was it. The moment I'd been both dreading and waiting for. The moment where fear would either be replaced by proof or swallow me whole. I opened my laptop at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten breakfast together for years. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure I could hear it in my ears. I logged into the camera system using the email I'd created in secret. The screen loaded slowly, each second stretching painfully long. When the footage finally appeared, I felt my breath catch. There was our bedroom, there was the nightstand, there was me lying still pretending to be unconscious, and there was Devin. Watching it from the outside felt unreal, like I was watching a stranger's life instead of my own. I saw him bring the pills, saw him wait, saw him lean over me and check my face. I saw the way his expression changed when he thought I was out cold. The warmth vanished, the softness disappeared. What replaced it was cold, focused, almost professional. That alone made my stomach churn. I watched him take my phone, unlock it with practiced ease, and scroll through my messages. I watched him type replies in my name. I watched him change my clothes, lifting my arms, adjusting my body like I was an object instead of a person. I had to pause the video more than once just to breathe. But none of that prepared me for the basement footage. My hands were shaking as I click it to the second camera. The basement appeared on the screen, dimly lit but clear enough. I saw Devin come down the stairs, calm and confident. Then minutes later, I saw another man enter my home, a stranger, then another on a different night. Each time Devin greeted them like customers, like this was a business transaction. I watched him accept cash. I watched him show them something on his phone and laptop. Their reactions told me everything I needed to know: smiles, nods, anticipation. I felt sick. I realized then that the voices I'd heard weren't just conversations, they were negotiations. The truth crashed down on me all at once. Devin wasn't just drugging me, he was using me, exploiting me, selling access to images and videos of my unconscious body. He had turned my violation into a product, and he'd been doing it for months. The timestamp data confirmed it. 7 months. 7 months of my life erased, stolen, turned into something I never agreed to. I sat there in silence, staring at the screen, unable to move. My body felt numb, like my soul had stepped outside of it to survive what I was seeing. I didn't open the files he had stored online. I couldn't. Knowing they existed was enough. Knowing what he'd done was enough to shatter me completely. The man I had loved had been trafficking my dignity while I slept beside him every night. When the shock wore off, something else took its place. Rage, not the loud kind, not the kind that screams, the quiet, steady kind that hardens your spine and clears your mind. Devin had made one mistake. He thought I would never know. He thought I would stay confused, tired, obedient. He thought I was powerless, and he was wrong. I backed everything up, every clip, every timestamp, every transaction I could see. I uploaded it to multiple cloud accounts. I saved it to flash drives. I emailed copies to myself. I wasn't taking any chances. When I was done, I packed a bag, just essentials, clothes, documents, my laptop. I didn't leave a note. I didn't owe him an explanation. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. I drove straight to Kesha's place. The moment she saw my face, she knew. We sat at her kitchen table and I told her everything. I showed her the footage. She didn't interrupt. She didn't question me. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. "We're calling the police," she said. "Not tomorrow, not later, right now." The officers came quickly. One of them, a woman, listened as I told my story from the beginning. She watched the footage. Her face hardened with every passing minute. When I finished, she looked at me and said words I will never forget. "What happened to you is a serious crime, multiple crimes." For the first time in months, I felt seen, believed. They moved fast after that. Protective orders, warrants. Devin was arrested at his workplace later that day. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. Knowing he was finally powerless was enough. He tried to call me from jail 2 days later. I answered once just to hear what lie he thought could save him. He begged. He minimized. He claimed it wasn't what it looked like. I laughed and hung up. That was the last time I ever spoke to him. The trial took months. Months of reliving everything, of hearing his lawyer try to twist the truth, of sitting in court while strangers dissected my pain. But the evidence was overwhelming. The footage, the lab results, the records. Devin was found guilty on every count. When the judge read the sentence, I felt something inside me finally loosen. He couldn't hurt me anymore. Standing there, listening to the verdict, I understood something important. Revenge doesn't always look like destruction. Sometimes it looks like exposure, like truth, like justice spoken out loud in a courtroom where lies can't survive. Devon thought he had broken me. Instead, he revealed exactly who he was, and in doing so, he gave me back my power. If you uncovered proof like this, would you stay silent to protect your peace or expose the truth no matter the cost? If you believe truth matters more than comfort, share this story. Silence protects the wrong people, and exposure is sometimes the only justice. After the verdict, people kept asking me if I felt relieved, if justice made everything better, if I could finally move on now that it was over. I never knew how to answer those questions because the truth is complicated. Justice doesn't erase trauma. It doesn't rewind time. It doesn't give you back the nights you lost or the person you used to be before everything shattered. But it does something else. It gives you a place to stand. And after months of feeling like the ground beneath me didn't exist, that mattered more than I could explain. Devon was sentenced to 18 years in prison. 18 years for drugging me, exploiting me, and turning my body into something he thought he owned. The judge's voice was calm when he read the sentence, almost clinical, but very word felt heavy. Devon cried. He actually cried, not because he was sorry, but because he was caught. Because the control he thought he had was gone forever. I didn't look away. I wanted him to see me standing there alive, unbroken, no longer afraid of him. The divorce was finalized not long after. I got the house, but I sold it immediately. I couldn't breathe in that space anymore. Every wall felt like it was watching me. Every room held memories I didn't want to carry into my future. I donated most of the money I received to organizations that help survivors of abuse. Not because it erased what happened, but because I needed to know something good could grow from what he tried to destroy. Healing wasn't fast, it wasn't neat, it didn't happen in a straight line. There were nights I woke up gasping for air, convinced I was trapped again. Days when the sight of a pill bottle made my hands shake. Moments when I questioned every memory, every decision, every part of myself. Therapy became my anchor. My therapist reminded me again and again that what happened wasn't my fault. That trusting someone you love is not a weakness. That predators don't choose their victims because they are foolish, but because they are kind, empathetic, and willing to believe in others. I moved to a new city, new apartment, new routines, new locks that I controlled. For a long time, I avoided relationships entirely. The idea of letting someone close felt impossible, but healing has a quiet way of surprising you. Slowly, I started rebuilding my life. I went back to teaching. I laughed again, not because everything was fine, but because I refused to let him take that from me too. What Devon did changed me forever. I won't pretend it didn't. I'm more cautious now, more aware. I ask questions I never thought I'd need to ask, but it also gave me something I didn't expect. Strength, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet strength that comes from surviving something you thought would end you. The strength to trust my instincts. The strength to walk away when something feels wrong. The strength to speak up even when my voice shakes. If you're listening to this and something in my story feels familiar, please hear me. Confusion is not normal. Memory gaps are not normal. Being controlled under the disguise of care is not love. If your instincts are whispering that something is wrong, listen to them. Tell someone you trust. Seek help. You are not imagining things, and you are not alone. Devon took 7 months of my life. He took my sense of safety. He took my innocence. But he did not take my future. He did not take my voice. He did not take my ability to stand up and say, "This happened to me and I survived it." And that is something he will never be able to touch. I'm still here. I'm still standing. And if you're going through something you don't yet have words for, I promise you this: survival is possible. Healing is possible. And justice, in whatever form it takes, begins the moment you stop doubting yourself and start believing the truth your heart already knows. What would reclaiming your life look like if the person who hurt you no longer had power over you? If this story resonated with you, subscribe to this channel. These stories aren't just entertainment, they're reminders that survival is possible and your story matters too.